Well, today we have an embarrassment of riches, far more than 99 manuscripts. And here's the latest data that we have on the New Testament manuscripts. In Greek alone, the official number is 5,865. Basically, we have about 5,500 Greek New Testament manuscripts. The New Testament immediately spread throughout the ancient world, and by the end of the 2nd century, we believe, it was translated into Latin. And Latin started to take off. It became the lingua franca of all of Europe, and so we actually have more manuscripts in Latin than we do in Greek of the New Testament. About 10,000 Latin manuscripts. Not only that, but the New Testament was translated into a number of other languages. And conservatively, we could say there are between 5,000 and 10,000 manuscripts in these other languages. Again, not based on a printed edition. These are all handwritten manuscripts. Now, if you had a magic wand and you could just wipe all of these out in one fell swoop, we would still not be left without a witness. And the reason is because of the church fathers. Starting in the late 1st century, we have church fathers who comment on the New Testament. There are even 1 or 2 fathers who may have written their works before the New Testament was completed. So they comment on the New Testament, and as time goes on, they write more and more comments. They would write whole treatises on the book of Romans. Origen, for example, 3rd century, middle of the 3rd century, wrote a 15-volume commentary on Paul's letter to the Romans. We don't have the full thing anymore. We have Rufinus's 10-volume abridgment in Latin. So we're talking about, these folks simply did not have the gift of brevity. Kind of like me, with my preface, it goes on forever. But they did comment on the New Testament. They wrote theological treatises. They did homilies, sermons, commentaries, all sorts of material about the New Testament. And many times they even discussed textual variants. And they said, actually, the oldest manuscripts don't have this word, but the more recent ones do have it. So they could discuss those things, and we could pinpoint a time and a place when certain manuscripts had variants. So they're extremely helpful. But if you had a magic wand and wiped out all of these other witnesses, you could virtually replicate the entire New Testament many times over, just from the writings of the church fathers. And several decades ago, the quotations that have been documented have come to well over 1 million quotations of the New Testament by these church fathers. The New Testament, if you were to compare it to the average classical work, what would we end up with? Well, the average classical Greek writer has less than 15 copies of his works still in existence. You stack them up, they're about 4 feet high. So how would that compare to the New Testament? I thought about this, but how can I express this visually? So I thought, well, the average classical work, it's kind of like this podium, about 4 feet high. This is actually a photograph of this very podium. And then the New Testament, what could I use to illustrate that? Well, how about the Empire State Building? See that dot? It's about a pixel. It's 4 feet tall. And here's the Empire State Building, 1,454 feet tall. But it's not just one Empire State Building. So you have the average classical author. He's got manuscripts that stack up to one podium. The New Testament, we're just talking about the Greek and other versions, just like we are for the classical authors. And we're not talking about the church fathers' quotations. I have no idea how to quantify that. It's not just one Empire State Building. It's 4.5. That's 6,600 feet tall, 1.25 miles high, versus 4 feet high. So you can understand why scholars speak about having an embarrassment of riches when it comes to the New Testament.